Okay, so this video is titled Faith and Possibility. So this video comes about kind of as a kind of interesting event. I was just doing some reading at night, and sometimes during my scripture study, sometimes I don't know if it's mediocre, but I just study and I get some insights, and then other times it's just like a floodgate opens up and it doesn't stop. And it's almost equivalent, to use an analogy of like drinking, is a tried analogy. It's used a lot to describe overwhelming information, but it's like drinking water from a fire hose. It just comes flooding, and I just sometimes wish I was more adept at retaining all of the information. But with that being said, I felt impressed to kind of share some of my thoughts. I've been wanting to do another video, but I haven't for a while felt impressed to share anything, and so I've kind of waited. But tonight I got an impression and felt that some people might benefit from the insights the Spirit has given me, and hopefully it might help others in their search for truth and understanding. So in Hebrews, I don't remember what chapter, I want to say Hebrews 12, but the writer, we'll say Paul, even though there's some dispute about whether Paul wrote it. I'll just say Paul for sake of simplicity. Paul writes that, and I'm paraphrasing, that without faith we cannot please God. And that's a statement that has stuck out to me for a while, and I've kind of wondered what Paul meant by that. And I think there's a lot to unpack, and what I'm going to share is just a little snippet, I think, of what Paul is saying. But the question is why? Why is it that faith pleases God? And so I'm going to kind of give you the answer, and then I'm going to work back to explain how I arrived, I guess, answer a conclusion. I'll give you the conclusion. I'm not going to hide the ball. So I'm going to give you the conclusion of why faith is required, and then work backwards to explain. So faith is required because faith is the space where God acts. It serves as the intersection between the possibility and actuality. So what do I mean by this? Let me see if I can explain it. So to understand the importance of faith is to understand the interplay between order and chaos. And this idea is very well represented in the yin and yang symbol in Taoism, right? We've all seen it. It's unfortunately it's become commoditized and widely distributed that we've kind of really lost its meaning, which sometimes happens with mass distribution. I mean, it's what it is, but I think we sometimes see it and we say, oh, that's cool, and then we don't fully understand the deeper significance and the implications. So what the yin and yang represents is this complete balance of order and chaos. And this is important because sometimes when we talk about scriptures, or those who are familiar with Genesis, we read that at the beginning there was chaos and things were in disorder. The Hebrew word used frequently to describe this disorder is tohu and bohu. Tohu bohu. And this describes this kind of barren emptiness, right? And then Genesis has this beautiful imagery of the light coming in and the light separating the chaos and creating something from that chaos. And so, for on our first blush, we might think, oh, chaos is bad. All right, God's coming in, he's trying to divide the chaos and create order. Order must be good and chaos must be bad. And in some sense, it's true, right? Chaos left on tap is bad in a sense that it can prevent flourishing in human life. But chaos itself is not necessarily bad. And what I mean by that is, and the psychologist Jordan Peterson has a really good explanation, and so I encourage anyone to wants to kind of flesh this out more, and who even feel that my explanation is inadequate to read him, because he can explain it. But too much order is also a problem, because too much order becomes rigid, it becomes authoritarian, it becomes static. It becomes unmovable. And so it's stuck in its ways, and it won't move, and it will stay with what it's always done. And that's a problem, especially when we come to the concept of truth and light, progression, right? Too much rigidity and strictness prevents growth. And I'm going to talk more about this, or write more about this in my blog, because it's important when we're talking about truth to realize that while there is objective truth, truth is relative to some sense, right? What is good at one time might not be good at another time. For instance, there's a reason why we don't let 3-year-olds drive cars. There's reasons why we, again, I guess 3-year-olds, we don't let them carry knives. There's a reason why if you want to be a doctor, you have to first show and demonstrate knowledge. And so even in our own world, we see it all the time, that there's a time and place for everything. And this goes to another concept as well that I'm trying to get around to fleshing out. But the idea of time and seasons, and how everything has a place and order in the universe, and it has a reason and purpose. And the scriptures often point to instances where chaos results or problems arise when things are done outside of the sequence. And so what I'm kind of getting at is this idea that if you become too rigid, then you're not willing to adapt to the new truth you learn, and you can't progress, right? And so you need to be flexible, and this comes with the gospel as well. And this is clearly, for those who are LDS, is exemplified in the story of Nephi and his knowledge that the Lord would allow him, or not even allow, would command him to kill another person, right? And so if Nephi was rigid and said, oh no, I'm going to stay by the law of Moses, and thou shalt not kill, and I'm not going to bend to anything else, and what would have happened? Well, we would have got the plates, and the language would not have been able to be carried on, and Nephi's posterity would dwindle in unbelief, right? So Nephi had to be flexible. He couldn't be fully rigid. And so going back to this yin and yang symbol and this idea of chaos and order, is the yin and yang symbol demonstrates that the best balance, the optimal condition for, I guess, reality for us, is that perfect balance between order and chaos. Too much order becomes rigid, it stifles, it restricts, it dominates. But on the other hand, right, and we saw this again with Genesis, too much chaos is a problem too, because it creates disorder, it creates uncertainty. I mean, if we didn't, and we can even see this in our daily lives, like Uh, you know, I'm a lawyer by profession. Like, if there were no rules regarding litigation and when a lawsuit could be filed and when things were due, it would be absolute mayhem and nothing would get done. Money would be wasted. And it's the same thing with school. If there was no structure to the school schedule and it was just like kids come and go, there would be no learning, right? And we see this with definitely in schools. There has to be some structure. Otherwise, it'd be chaotic, and it wouldn't be fertile ground for anything. And so, too much chaos is a problem as well. But if that can be balanced, that can achieve the most good. And here's why, and this then will relate to faith. When you have chaos, the unknown, because chaos represents the unknown, but it also represents possibility. Order represents what is, what already is established. But when you can mend those together, and notice how the yin and yang, the ends are like, the other sides are on each, the eyes or whatever, the hole is on the yin, the hole for the yin is on the side of the yang, and the hole for the yang is on the side of the yin. And so there's kind of indicates that they need to also be immersed and kind of blended together, right? There's a one part in each side. And that's because when there's both a balance, then there's growth and flourishing, because the chaos, the potentiality gets turned and ordered into something that's good. And that's actually what God expects for us to do. Sorry, it's late. Expects for us to do is to take the chaos, take whatever is in disorder, meditate, use reason, discernment, and then turn that into something good. Again, going back to Nephi, because apparently that's all I can remember. But Nephi, when he built the boat, that is an archetype of chaos to order. Before the boat was built, there was nothing there. Well, I mean, there was nothing. It was in trees and his materials. He had to make the materials, but it was all part of nature. It was scattered. It didn't have a purpose. It was just there. And what Nephi did, through the Lord's help, is he took and organized those materials and ordered it, and then created something from it. There are other examples as well, but I encourage you to read through the scriptures and look for those motifs where things are ordered into something else. Brother Jared's another one, right? Rocks, stones turning to light. And so what we are to do is we are to order things, and that's who servants of God are. That's what God does, and that's what his servants do, is they take the chaos and they order it. And that's what God did with Genesis. He took the chaos and he ordered it, and he created earth, and he's created a place for us to come down and learn. And he expects us to do the same, and that's indicative by the injunction he gave to Adam in the garden to be a ruler, right? He is to be the image of God. He's a ruler in that image. And his job is to order and organize. And that is very apparent when Adam is on the earth, because he starts to name the animals. He starts to create order. So he represents God. And he is a mini imager, as some theologians say, but he is a mini representative, and he's acting like God in his way of ordering and organizing. And so how this relates to faith is that faith serves as the organizing principle. So what faith does is that faith chooses to look into the chaos and find potentiality. It chooses to say, oh, people say this can't be done. I say it can be done. And then to use the Spirit and to use reason to turn that chaotic element into something of order. And this is how society has flourished from time immemorial. And we have many people to thank for taking the time, risking, and doing something new to create the inventions that we have today, the electricity and other inventions that we are so fortunate to have. And a lot of these people did it and were ridiculed and mocked and seen as being stupid or not knowing what they're talking about. Even with our understanding of thermodynamics, some of the earliest pioneers and thinkers were seen as being so backwards, because what they chose to do is they chose to go into the chaos and they chose to try to find something new. And through that, and they might have failed here and there, but they kept trying to find something, bring something out of that chaos and order it into something. And by doing so, and by finding the right principles and being able to order the world, it led to growth and progression. And it is through these people, and yes, mainly white men, who took the time and sacrificed their lives and sacrificed time to create the world we live in today. And obviously there's more to say, and I can make more commentary on that, but I mean, the subtext of what I'm saying is pretty clear. We have completely villainized the men of the past for the things that they've done. We stand on the shoulders of giants and we stab them in the eye. Well, if you stab a giant in the eye, or when you're standing on, they're going to fall. And what we have from them will fall. And so that's something to be paying attention to as we have removed meritocracy and have pushed for, racial equity. And I'm going to write more on this, but you will start to see the decline of civilization, because we are going to move towards chaos without any guiding principles how to order it. And we will invite more and more chaos into our lives, and we will watch as the chaos, like a flood. And there's a reason why Isaiah uses flood-like imagery when he's talking about the end times and he's talking about God's judgment, because water unrestrained is chaotic. Water restrained is ordered, right? Living water is good, but water that's left untapped, unkept, or unordered without bounds is chaotic. And so, metaphorically, we are inviting a flood of chaos because we are not adhering to the principles. But back to the original point, why faith? So faith orders the chaos. Faith does not have complete knowledge. Rather, faith has reasons to believe in an expected outcome based off what the Spirit says, right? But also off of reason. And it also involves trial and error. But what faith does is it takes that chaos. Just to emphasize this again, in case my meandering has lost some people, it's taken the chaos and it's ordered it. And remember how I said earlier that that's what God does. He orders things. He takes chaos and he turns it into something. He brings something about through the chaos. And so no wonder, going back to what Paul said, no wonder faith pleases God, because faith aligns with God's purposes. God acts by faith. When he created the world, it was an act of faith. He chose to see potentiality in the chaos and order it. We are to do the same. And if we expect to be like him, we need to adopt that same habit, that same disposition, mindset, perspective, whatever you want to call it. And if we do so, that's how we please him, because we become like him. And there's nothing more that God wants than for us to be like him, so he can share all that he has with us. And so, in kind of concluding this, when you go through your life and you go through your day, take the time to look and see what elements are chaotic and then look and see how you can order them. And it doesn't have to be anything profound. In fact, sometimes it might not seem profound, but the littlest things can actually have a profound effect stretched over a long period of time. But anyways, take something that's just maybe chaotic. It could be a family member whose behavior is destructive, or it could even be your own personal life. For me, one of the little things I'm trying to work on is keeping my house clean. I sometimes have a habit of just dropping things off, and well, you keep doing that, it becomes kind of chaotic. There's a mess. And so, I'm trying to do that little thing to steer and bump things into a better direction. And so take your life and look for ways to steer things back and bump things back into order, but also look at potentiality. And that relates to what God can do in your life. And realize that if you are completely open to what God can do, He can do tremendous things. And that goes back to this potentiality and faith. If you believe and you're open to the possibility, and that you have not set any limits on how God can achieve His ends within you, then you will become a very powerful person, because God can use you and work with you in any way possible. There's nothing off limits. And because there's nothing off limits, God has a wide open array of things, of ways, of the path that you can take. Or because you're opening yourself to God, I want to rephrase that better. Because you open yourself to God, He can guide you on the path that leads to your end goal, to what He sees. Because He all sees us. We're His workmanship. We're His poema, as I said in the blog post. We're His craft. And so if we are completely malleable and we allow it soft, like we're like soft clay instead of hard clay, then God can mold us easily into who we want to be. And we don't resist. And He can then give us, fully mold us into who He wants us to become. So hopefully that helps, and that gives some perspective and understanding to some of those who are maybe wondering how faith connects into all of this.